Today we begin with a question of human testing and the dilemma posed by the need to do research for the greater good and the right of human test subjects to know exactly what they're signing up for. Our incredible story begins in 2004 with a federal study of 1,300 extremely premature infants. Some parents say they had no idea they agreed to a risky experiment that could injure or kill their babies.
Little Drayshan Cook came into the world at 1 pound 11 ounces, fighting for his life. His mother, Charissa, was barely 6 months pregnant when he was born.
I remember the night that I went into labor, I was a hysterical wreck. I was afraid, I was scared, I was in shock.
How big was he? Do you remember?
Yeah, he would fit in your hand.
Shortly after his birth at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, Charissa agreed to enroll Drayshan in a study called Support. She says the hospital gave the impression she was simply signing up to get support in caring for a preemie.
Your thought was, when you signed the papers, that what was going to happen?
That my son would be getting the best care possible, and that even with his prematurity being as extreme as it was, that it would be okay because I had all of this help.
She had no clue, she says, that the Support study was actually a national experiment on the most fragile of test subjects, 1,300 extremely premature infants. Bernita Lewis also agreed to enroll her baby Christian in the Support study at the same hospital.
Christian was born at 27 weeks.
How much did he weigh?
He was 1 pound, 9 ounces. He was very tiny.
She says a hospital worker told her the study was just to collect data.
She asked Dad, would I be interested in Christian being in a study? They wanted to use his medical records to help babies in the future. And I told them absolutely they could use any records they wanted to use.
Did she tell you there was a possible risk of death?
No, there were no risks discussed.
Support stands for Surfactant Positive Airway Pressure and Pulse Oximetry Randomized Trial. Funded with $20.8 million tax dollars, it was a collaboration among the National Institutes of Health and 24 research bodies, including Duke and Yale universities and medical schools. Researchers had good intentions. They already knew that without enough oxygen, preemies could get brain damaged or die. But too much oxygen, they could go blind. The Support study was searching for the sweet spot.
And the question is, what level of oxygen would be optimum in order to save as many babies as possible without having the survivors become blind?
To find out, the infants were randomly assigned, as with the flip of a coin, to either a low oxygen group or a high oxygen group. The study reached a tragic conclusion. The babies in the high oxygen group were more likely to go blind. Those unlucky enough to have been put in the low oxygen group were more likely to die. When the findings became known, similar research around the world was halted midstream. Bioethicist Dr. John Lantos defended the Support study as an expert witness against families who unsuccessfully sued for damages, including Bernita and Charissa.
This was a study that was well designed, conducted to the highest ethical standards with a completely adequate consent that was conducted without harming any babies and led to an important finding that's going to save lots of lives.
On nearly every point, Dr. Michael Carome disagrees. He's an internationally recognized expert on research ethics at the watchdog group Public Citizen.
What's wrong with what they did in the study, in your view?
The parents of these babies weren't told the exact purpose of the research, the nature of the research in terms of how experimental it was, and the risks of the research.
Adding to the controversy, researchers didn't tell parents a remarkable fact. They had altered the infants' oxygen monitors to give false readings so the hospital wouldn't adjust them outside of their assigned low or high oxygen range.
Babies in the study were put on oxygen monitors that were rigged to give untrue or false readings.
That is correct.
In terms of things that have happened in the past, how bad is this?
I think this is extremely serious and about as bad as it gets.
It seems to me that there's a lot of second-guessing, armchair quarterbacking, and playing gotcha here.
The debate would be purely academic if it weren't for an extraordinary turn of events. After questions were raised, the government agency that polices study ethics sided with critics and issued a searing indictment of the government-led study. In a letter in 2013, the Office for Human Research Protections told researchers they violated federal regulations for informed consent for their failure to describe the reasonably foreseeable risks of blindness, neurological damage, and death. Dr. Carone was once a senior leader at the Office for Human Research Protections.
The ethics office was, in essence, saying these consent forms were unethical.
Absolutely.
The concept of informed consent arose from an American tragedy, the U.S. government's syphilis experiment on black men in Tuskegee, Alabama in 1932. For 40 years, the men were neither told they were in a study nor treated for their syphilis. An outcry in 1972 led to new rules. Researchers are now required to disclose risks to test subjects and get their voluntary informed consent. And studies like Support must be approved by ethics experts where the research is conducted.
These were prestigious institutions and the federal government. How does something like this slip past everybody?
That is a great concern of ours. We looked at the consent forms from 22 institutions, and they all failed in their duty to protect human subjects in this study.
Most of the criticism is not coming from parents, but from regulators who, in my opinion, don't really understand the circumstances of oxygen therapy.
When the Support parents learned about the true risks, the surviving study children were 6 years old.
What thoughts did you have?
It was really emotional. A lot of crying, a lot of disbelief, a lot of heartache, and then it was anger. I'm his mom. You know, I'm supposed to protect him, but it was almost like I threw him out to the wolves, you know?
I was angry, and I couldn't believe that some people who took oaths to protect people would actually do this. That was mind-boggling.
If you had been told the risks involved and what they were really going to do, would you have signed him up?
Absolutely not. No.
Yet there were no apologies. Instead, the Support researchers made a bold new claim that's particularly controversial. They said the babies were actually better off for having been in the study.
The risks of not being in that study were comparable to the risks of being in that study, and perhaps even higher.
Dr. Carone argues that's simply wrong.
There's no doubt that some babies, because they were in this study, died as a result.
Amid the criticism, the Support researchers and National Institutes of Health dug in. They launched a public campaign of opinion letters and meetings to attack the Office for Human Research Protections and pressured it to suspend enforcement action.
The sensational claims of calling people unethical, I think, really detract from the serious discussion that needs to occur.
The research community, many in the bioethics community, and NIH have rallied together to defend this unethical research, and that's part of the problem.
You were so little.
Today, Drayshan and Christian are both 9 and doing well considering their challenges, but they have many lingering health struggles from respiratory problems to brain disorders. Their moms are left asking if the Support study factors in.
We don't know, if it would have happened anyway, or if it was caused by this, and it's just a game of just wondering.
He was born premature at 25 weeks. So we could expect some things, but to know that some others could have been prevented, that makes me angry. And so to the doctors or to the researchers, best thing I can say is shame on you. What does that say?
Double.
Okay.
More than 80 years after the Tuskegee experiments, the Support study has reopened painful wounds and is raising questions as to whether the protections for human test subjects are fundamentally flawed.
Those who've conducted this study and the federal government at large have basically said they don't think they did anything wrong.
I don't see how anyone could say nothing was wrong with playing Russian roulette with babies who had no say-so, no choice, no anything, just trying to survive.
Numerous Support researchers, the National Institutes of Health, or NIH, and the University of Birmingham at Alabama declined our interview requests. After the study revealed more deaths among babies on low oxygen, the American Academy of Pediatrics issued new recommendations to keep preemies on the upper end of the oxygen curve. In other words, doctors should not do what the support researchers did to half the babies. Everyone knows that medicine has saved countless lives. Civilization might not exist today without it. But in the most prescribed country in the world, prescription drugs are also a leading cause of death. According to Harvard University's Center for Ethics, each year properly prescribed drugs in the U.S. cause about 2.74 million serious adverse drug reactions and about 128,000 fatalities, 350 deaths a day. In 2014, the world's top 10 pharmaceutical firms pulled in $429.4 billion in revenue. Their profits range from 10 to 43%. With all that money at stake, it's easy to see why you don't always get the whole truth about a drug's risks. In recent years, major drug companies have paid over $13 billion to resolve federal, civil, and criminal allegations of fraud, many involving popular and widely used drugs. Today, a chilling case in point. An antipsychotic pill called Risperdal made by Johnson & Johnson's pharmaceutical subsidiary, Janssen. Some of the material in this report may be too graphic for sensitive viewers and children.
Josh Scholl was in 7th grade when he noticed something upsetting.
I'm like, this isn't normal. So I went to my parents and I'm like, hey, there's this lump under my breast. Can you guys check it out? And they felt it and they're like, ooh, that's not right. And so we went to the doctors for it.
You were like a 10-year-old kid at the time.
Mm-hmm.
The pediatrician said not to worry. But Josh's mom knew better. She wondered if one factor could be Risperdal, the prescription medicine Josh had been taking for 4 years for tics from Tourette's syndrome.
I'm one who likes to research things, so I got on Google right away and started researching boys and medicines and found a few moms out there who had posted their kids were on Risperdal who also developed lumps. So I called the pediatrician back and said, I want him off this medicine. And so we stopped it that day.
What was the pediatrician's response when you linked the lump in his breast to the medicine?
I think they just thought I was a paranoid mom and agreed to switch the medicine just to appease me. But I don't know, mom's intuition, I knew something was wrong.
Good girl. Mom was right. She didn't know it then, but thousands of boys taking Risperdal were growing female breasts. Some of them even produced milk. It's a condition called gynecomastia, shown in this unidentified Risperdal patient. It can happen when a male has a spike in a naturally occurring hormone called prolactin. Experts say Risperdal can cause prolactin levels to rise.
I remember one of my best friends had a swimming pool and we would all go to his house and go swimming, and none of them had like larger breasts or any lumps or anything.
Did you ask your friends or you just
I asked one of them. I asked the best friend if he had like ever noticed anything about his breast, and he's like, no, I never noticed. And I'm just like, oh, okay, it's weird that's happening to me then.
He stopped taking the medicine, but the breasts continued to grow. It was over, I think, a 2-year period where they said, wait 6 months, it'll be gone in 6 months. While we waited the 6 months, it continued to grow. Then he noticed the lump in the other side.
It turns out there's a dark backstory. At the time, Risperdal, an antipsychotic, wasn't approved for use in children at all. But as federal whistleblowers would later allege, Janssen instructed sales reps to market Risperdal as safe and effective for all kinds of childhood disorders, such as Tourette's, ADD, and autism, knowing it posed serious health risks. Philadelphia attorney Stephen Scheller represents Josh. He tried the first Risperdal case last year, an autistic boy who developed size 46 double D breasts.
So the better it's working for you, the more likely you are to grow breasts.
Right.
Key evidence was this internal document known as Table 21 from the original Risperdal study in 2002. Scheller says it showed 7.8% of Risperdal patients whose prolactin levels shot above normal after 8 to 12 weeks developed prolactin-related side effects like gynecomastia. Janssen insiders seemed concerned in internal documents. How do you want to handle the one significant value, asks a reviewer. This may be notable. I think we need to discuss this somewhere in the manuscript. Instead, the head of the Risperdal study eliminated Table 21, according to Scheller.
He specifically made the decision not to tell the public, not to tell the doctors, not to tell even the FDA or anybody about this study that they did in 2001 or 2 that specifically finds the association, even though the law requires it.
A year after the original Risperdal study was published without Table 21, Josh was prescribed Risperdal and developed the very problem it seemed to warn about.
We saw our child, who was this outgoing, happy kid who had all these friends, becoming more regressed. He was shy. He stopped going out with his friends, wouldn't take his shirt off at the beach, wouldn't change in front of anybody.
Yeah, it was very difficult because me personally, I ran cross country starting my 8th grade year. And so cross country starts in the summer, it gets really hot. So all my friends would take their shirts off, and I was self-conscious. I didn't want to take my shirt off. I'm like, oh, it's 90 degrees, but, you know, do I want to take my shirt off because I have these breasts? And, you know, no one else had to make that decision. And then if I did take it off, I felt self-conscious. I was looking around town like, oh, is that person in that car looking at me? You know, is my friends looking at me? You know, it's really bad.
Johnson & Johnson had no comment on Josh's case and declined our interview requests. In a statement, the company said it did not withhold any relevant data. As to why Table 21 was left out of the original Risperdal study, a spokesman implied it wasn't relevant because the researchers concluded there was no direct correlation to breast growth in boys.
Because there's a lot of us together. Yeah.
Josh believes otherwise. There are no photos of him at his worst. He stopped having his picture taken. Like some with severe gynecomastia, he chose a drastic solution, a double mastectomy.
We went to the breast surgeon who, after seeing him, said he had the largest breasts in a boy that he had ever seen in this area and agreed to do the surgery. He had a bilateral mastectomy done, so he was off school for about 6 weeks.
It must be a fairly traumatic surgery.
It was very traumatic for him. He had double drain tubes. He had those in for a week. He had home nursing coming twice a day, but he couldn't move. He had to lay flat on his back because whenever he would move, the tubes would move and they'd be painful. They actually did reconstructive surgery. One side was bigger than the other, so they had to remove the nipple, and then we removed a lot of the tissue and replaced the nipples.
How old was he when he had the surgery?
It was 2 months before his 13th birthday. So he was 12 years old.
Almost no one ever knew why Josh was out of school those 6 weeks. He's one of 10,700 Risperdal patients now suing drug maker Janssen.
The risks are being hidden from the public because the companies want to be able to sell as much of their product as possible.
Parent company Johnson & Johnson told us Risperdal has helped and is still helping millions of patients with debilitating mental illnesses and neurodevelopmental conditions as part of a comprehensive treatment plan.
I've recently learned about what some of these boys have gone through. I didn't know some of them are lactating. I didn't know some have developed third breasts. And Josh was fortunate to not have to go through those steps, I think because we were diligent and caught onto it quickly and got it taken care of. But my heart goes out to the kids that weren't as lucky.
Today, it takes a lot of guts for Josh to talk publicly about what happened to him, and even more to show it. But he's done hiding his scars.
About the experience, it was one that I wish I didn't have to go through. And I hope all the other kids that are going through it, you know, I feel bad that they had to go through it too. Because, yeah, the company, I think they knew that it developed gynecomastia, and, you know, to make us, all of us, go through it, you know, it's not just like it's me and a handful of other people, it's thousands of people that are going through it. So to make all of us go through it, and they knew just to make a profit, it's sickening.
In 2013, Johnson & Johnson paid $2.2 billion to settle a host of criminal and civil fraud claims, illegally marketing Risperdal and other drugs, paying kickbacks to doctors and nursing home pharmacies to prescribe Risperdal, knowing it posed stroke and serious risks to older patients, claiming Risperdal lessened diabetes risk. It did the opposite. Johnson & Johnson wouldn't say how much money it's made from Risperdal or how many are taking it.